Perfect. And Xiye, if you're in Mexico City, I'm here as well. We should definitely meet when you come here.
For sure, I would love that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Perfect. So we are live on YouTube now, and I would like to hand it over to our senior mentor, Dr. Ash, to start the session.
Thank you so much. I do want to say we're delighted, Shia, to have you here. Thank you so much for your leadership, for sort of really being the trailblazer and for setting the path to progress, and in a very true sense of the word, and also you walk the talk, so it really counts. And I want to thank you very, very much. And like Anna said, we'd be delighted to have you here in Mexico City, but also I want to say a warm welcome to the Pop family. We're delighted to you're already a very key part of the Pop family, so it's an honor to have you here. And I'd like to take this opportunity, Gia, to extend a very warm welcome, and welcome to everyone who is able to tune in and be with us here via Zoom right now. We're part of what is called the Pop Climate Leadership Conversations here today as a tribute to our chief mentor. This project aims to strengthen youth leadership and explore tactics that empower the youth to take action and tackle the most pressing environmental issues faced globally. We are conducting a series of conversations on leadership strategies, recommendations, reflections, and examples, each focused on global leadership and a different pressing environmental issue. This initiative is designed and implemented as a tribute to our chief mentor, late Dr. R.K. Pachori. Today, we have the pleasure and privilege of speaking with Xiye Bastida, a young leader who has truly mobilized the youth of the world and the world at large to be part of Fridays for Future as an initiative, and very importantly, climate action and advocacy, as well as activism through her own leadership. So I'd like to convey a very warm welcome to Xiye. Thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you for your values, your wisdom, and your beautiful heart, which guides us as we go forward. And once again, a warm welcome, and thank you for being a precious part of the Pop family. And with that, I hand over to Anna to take us through the rest of the conversation today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ash. And I will now go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Ms. Xiye Bastida was born and raised in Mexico as part of the Otomi Toltec indigenous peoples. She is a teenage climate activist based in New York City and one of the lead organizers of the Fridays for Future Youth Climate Strike movement. She mobilized 600 students from her school for the first climate strike in March 2019 and has taken a citywide leadership role in organizing climate strikes and speaking about climate justice issues in rallies and town halls. She sits on the administration committee of the People's Climate Movement, where she brings the voice of the youth to existing grassroots and climate organizations. Ms. Bastida launched a youth activism training program last summer of 2019 to expand the climate justice movement and is a member of the Sunrise Movement and Extension Rebellion. In 2018, she was invited to the 9th United Nations World Urban Forum to speak about indigenous cosmology. She also spoke at the COP25 on related issues, and she received the Spirit of the UN Award in 2018. Thank you so much for being here today. We will have 6 areas of conversation from the youth leaders of the Pop family. And our first question for you is, what does leadership mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this space and for this amazing opportunity to speak with all of you and to share it with the world as well, because I think that that's one of the special things about leadership. It's about sharing what you've learned and about, really learning from each other and learning from each other's experiences. And so for me, what leadership looks like, actually that bio has expanded a lot since COVID. And one of the things that I've done is started my own organization called Re-Earth Initiative, which is an international youth-led organization focused on highlighting the intersectionalities of the climate crisis. Because, so far the climate discourse has been around either apocalyptic, we're doomed, or has been around only conservation efforts that don't touch upon the very much needed relationship of humans and nature, because most conservation efforts are done are like about caging nature in and caging us out of it. So I have, done my best to bring this international organization together and youth from all around the world to speak about and touch upon these very important issues. And what I've learned in this period of leadership, not only in-person leadership with Fridays for Future and organizing up to 300,000 people to strike, but also online leadership, which is a little bit more abstract. I have learned that I'm trying to like bring them all into like a list. But one of the most important things that I've learned is the value of intergenerational dialogues. And especially as youth, I feel like, with the whole generational divides that there are and have been existing even before we as Gen Z arrived to this planet, I just think it's like hurting us a lot to have these generational divides, and especially coming from indigenous background, knowing that youth and elder circles, conversations with youth and elders are so important, because these conversations are about gaining wisdom from people who have lived so many experiences, and we give them energy because we are seeing new things, are changing the world in different things, are coming up with our own different vocabulary and definitions of justice. And so I think that it's very easy for us to just alienate people who haven't done their best to protect the earth, when in reality, it is them who have power right now and power in these leadership positions. But we can challenge that and we can ask more from them, and we can become those people in those leadership positions. So that's one of the very important things that I've learned. And the second one is really the power of community, because leadership in movements, it's really not about one or two people at all. It's about all of us sharing the space together, because movements do need leadership, but movements are nothing without the people coming together. And so most of the things that we try to do at We Earth Initiative and in the climate movement as general, and something that you all embody really well, is knowing each other, being able to actually get to know each other at an individual level, to the point where your movement is your lifestyle and it's your culture, and you're just trying to expand that to other people. So I think that's like a very important part of leadership. How do you believe in something so much that you get the person next to you to believe in it as well, so that they become leaders in their own communities that are different from your own? So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, that was an excellent answer. Thank you so much. I really liked what you said about intergenerational dialogue. I think there's so much to share between generations, and it's important to have the pathways to do so. I would now like to hand it over to Aman Gandhi, who will be asking the next question.
Yeah, so my question was that during the last years, the climate movement has primarily been led by the youth. So, do you think this is because of a lack of political leadership? And how has becoming a leader of youth, do you think, at such a young age and taking on such important responsibilities, has shaped your way of thinking as a whole?
I think those are very important questions, because the first part about are we rising up because there's lack of will in political leadership right now, I think that's something that I see all the time, and it's sad to see it, honestly. Like, just in my conversation that I had right now with Marta Delgado, and it's like she has been an environmentalist for her whole life, but that position of leadership, of having to be kind of leading a whole country and representing a whole country that has so many political divides and so much corruption, is hard, and it kind of clouds your judgment and your morals as to why did you even start this in the first place. And most leadership around the world, especially political, is led by 70-year-olds, like all of the like people who have already kind of lived a lot of what they like. I feel like their role right now is to help us as a new generation to come into these leadership positions, but instead they're just hoarding all of these leadership positions and trying to keep the system the same. And the thing is, we often say that the system is broken, but the truth is that it's working is working how they want it to work. It's actually working for the benefit of the few, and it's working in a way that is set to take advantage of Latin American countries like Mexico, where we have so many mining companies from Canada and the United States who come and destroy our communities. So that type of leadership is not constructive because it's rooted in power. And I think that some of the virtues that we have as youth is that we have been thrown into these leadership positions without having to think about financial compensation or about having to think about power dynamics. And that makes us so special, because that means that we are in this for the right reasons. We are in this because our heart tells us to be here, because our spirits tells us to be here. And it's such a different, it's not because we're here for a name or a label, it's because we want to change the world. And so that's why it's our role not only to challenge that leadership, but also to become that leadership. And can you repeat the second part of your question? I kind of flew out of my mind.
So the second part was basically how has becoming a leader at such a young age and taking on the important responsibility shaped your understanding as a whole?
Well, it's kind of a follow-up of what I already said. I think that once you become a leader, and once like our movements become recognized and widely recognized, it's so hard to remind yourself why you started in the first place. A lot of the times. And for example, personally, I don't know how, but I gained like a really big platform on social media and things like that. And if you saw my email, it's like thousands, not thousands, but like hundreds, literally hundreds of brand partnerships that are like, sell these gummies or sell this toothbrush or sell this pair of shoes and have this discount code. And for me, like at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is so great. This is another platform where I can speak about the things that matter to me. But then after digesting it some, I'm like, I'm literally perpetuating the system that I was trying to like strike against. You know, if I'm giving people discount codes, I'm feeding into consumerism, and telling everyone that it's fine to feed into that. So then I, did some self-reflection and said, this is not what we're here for. We're here as activists, and influencerism is not activism. So I think that that's one of the things that I've learned, that as you move on through your path and as we grow up and as we go into different sectors, we have to keep true to ourselves as much as possible. And that's the hardest part. Not how do you grow, but how do you stay true to your values? And the first part of starting a movement, the first part of starting anything is being true to who you are and what your values are and what your goals are, and not letting anything come in your path or clouding your judgment or diverting your values.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
so
think
much.
that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you so much, Aman, for your question. Would you like to add anything else?
No, I think that pretty much summed it up. And it was very insightful to know how a person can achieve so much from a very young age, and how an influencer could not lead that path, and an active and being an activist is more important. That was really insightful.
Thank you so much, Aman and Xiye. I would now like to hand it over to Nahib Perez from Mexico, who will be asking the next question.
Thank you, Anna. Here, I wanted to ask, we know that the youngest generations are fighting the hardest, as they will be the most affected by the climate crisis, right? So how do you envision the future, and what do you think is necessary to achieve this future?
I think that's a really important question, because I like all of us have seen the coverage of the climate crisis in a very, like I said before, apocalyptic way of, look at all these wildfires, look at this ocean acidification, melting ice caps, biodiversity loss. And it's sad. And like, I think many adults who have not had to deal with growing up don't understand how much it affects us to think that our kids might not be able to have the youth that we had or that our parents had. So that's why I approach all of my work with a lens of stubborn optimism, as quoted, as I quote from Christiana Figueres, who is a stubborn optimist and a self-called stubborn optimist. And this is the thing about the climate crisis. It is the biggest challenge that we've ever seen, and we're already seeing the effects of it. I saw the effects of it in my own hometown in Mexico when it flooded in 2015. And the thing is, if we fall into that complacency of this is where we are and we can't change it, we're not gonna get things done at the rate that we need to. I don't know what's going on with the water, but so instead of approaching it um, as we're already doomed, we have to approach it as we can change this. We have the power to change, the creativity, the, you know, seeing it as as an opportunity to shape the world that we want to see. And so it also feels like, I feel like it gives you so much more energy and so much more passion to think about the climate crisis as something that we are trying to build up from and fix in a way that works for us. And I actually recommend this documentary called 2040, which is about imagining the future in 2040 if we implemented all of the existing climate solutions. And I think that's one of the most important parts as well. We don't need like crazy solutions or crazy technology to get to the future we want to be at. We already have all of the technology necessary to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming and have like a good ecosystems, good biodiversity, good relationships with each other by 2040. So that's something that I always want to remind people of. The solutions are here. What we need is the will to push all of those forward. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. I agree completely. I think we need to own the change. If we want to see some change, we have to act first, right? We have to lead by example. I'll pass it over to Anna. Thank you, Xiye. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Nahid, and thank you, Xiye, for that amazing answer. I would now like to hand it over to Kevin, who will be asking the next question.
Thank you very much, Anna. And first of all, Xiye, I want to say that I admire you. I use your video a lot. Like every time I try to make people understand how we can shift our future, I show your Imagine the Future video that you made, both in English or in Spanish. So I really admire that. So my question is regarding people like me, which we are older. We're no older, obviously, but we are older than you. So many people from all generations are looking up to those leading the climate movement, such as you, for example. What would be your message to both the younger and the older generations?
Well, you know, something that I learned in my activism journey, and something that's somebody once told me this: whatever you do, make sure you hold the hand of someone older and hold the hand of someone younger. And I think that's fits into what I talked about before about intergenerational cooperation, because we cannot do these things in silos of age or of location or interest. The climate crisis touches everyone's lives, every single sector, and that means that every single sector is needed and that everyone's skills are needed for the solutions. So I think that what I would say to the slightly older generation, like millennials and like the generation of my parents, is you already chose what you want to do with your life. You are already in that path of finishing your education. And the question now is, how can you take what you already know, everything that you've already learned, the skills that you know you have, and utilize them to be part of the solution? Because for my generation who are still in high school or starting college, we still don't know what we want to do with our lives. We have no idea. You know, we don't know what jobs we're going to go into. We don't know what our interests are or our clubs are going to be. And so we still have to do some of that searching that takes time. But once you already figure it out, I think it is a lot more, you know, I'm not going to say easier, because nothing about changing the way we do things is easy, but it's, you know, you have that advantage of already knowing what you're good at. And I think for all of us, there's still a lot of like soul searching of what am I going to do with my life. So I think that that's what I would say to the slightly older generation. You know, you studied marketing, you studied architecture, you studied, you know, these different things. So going to climate communication, going to sustainable architecture, going to climate finance and energy finance. So all of these different things, I think, you know, some stuff that we're looking to. But something that I also saw recently was that, you know, there's, I don't know, I don't think that there's people who don't find their passion until they're like 40 years old or 20, 30 years old. And so if you don't think that where you are right now is your passion, you still can change, you know, what you focus on. And I think that that's also really special. In a changing world, we need people who are adaptable and people who can fall into the solutions that we need to achieve. And then when it comes to younger people, like kids, it's really hard to tell them that the world is in the state that it is. And a lot of parents actually have come to me and asked me, how do I tell my 4-year-old about the climate crisis? And what I always, and it gives me chills to just even say it right now, because you cannot just tell a 4-year-old, you might not be able to have kids, or you might have to relocate because of climate migration. What we have to do is communicate the climate crisis as the solutions that there are. So I think like it's the same, you know, general communication and also communication to younger kids. How can we like make even recycling fun? I know we're so past recycling and individual actions, but how can we even make like those individual actions towards, you know, taking care of Mother Earth part of your children's cultures and everyday lives?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Anna, if I may, I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So she life is tough. So eventually, when you live more years, life hits you harder, and maybe it doesn't hit you harder, but it accumulates. So eventually, people lose passion and energy. You, as young, how would you suggest, and how would you do it, not to lose passion and energy, and encourage older people not to lose it or get it back again?
Well, you know, I actually had a conversation with Dolores Huerta, who, you know, is an amazing leader for civil rights, who worked really closely with Cesar Chavez. And I asked her the same question because she's been in movements for so many years and she's over 60 years old now. And so I asked her, how do we deal with burnout or with losing your passion, or, you know, all of these different things that, you know, I have even been faced with when my mom told me you have to stop your activism because you're not a citizen in the United States. So if you challenge the government too much, they're probably gonna make you leave or something. And I told my mom in that moment of like, oh, I might not be able to do what I want to do anymore. I told my mom, you know, the climate crisis is a global issue. Wherever I am, I'm going to fight for it. So it's also about telling yourself that. But what Dolores Huerta told me was you have to celebrate your wins. And I think that that's something that seems so obvious, but at the same time, I had never done, because especially with activism, it's like thing after thing after thing after thing. How can we, like, you know, there's elections, and then there's COP, and then there's, you know, you want to change your school, or, you know, there's so many things that come one after the other that it often turns into a never-ending cycle of deadlines and work. And if we don't give ourselves that time to celebrate the wins that we did have, it's not going to, we're not going to feel fulfilled by the changes that we're making, because we're not recognizing the changes that we're already making. So I think that's my answer to, you know, when life gets tough, and I know it's gotten tough for all of us, especially during the pandemic. You know, my parents both had to go back to Mexico because of the immigration situation. I also had to go back. So I've been living by myself in the United States for a whole year without my family, which has been really hard for me. But knowing that you have people to fall back on, that community, people who will push you and that you can push other people, I think is like at the center of movements. And so that's what I would say: community, celebration, and then, you know, pursuing your passion.
Thank you very much, Xiye.
Thank you so much, Xiye, for that answer, and Kevin for that question. I think many of us here really needed to talk about that. It's so often that we run into walls or that we start burning out. So celebrating your wins is a really good tip. I would now like to hand it over to Camila, who will be asking the next question.
Thank you so much, Anna.